Superstar free agent wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins said that he would love to play with Justin Herbert, but does it actually make sense for the Chargers?
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together for 7 seasons now, but this is our 5th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys for making us your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go follow or subscribe for free on YouTube and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, whenever a superstar mentions the quarterback of your favorite team, that is always going to have your ears perk up a little bit. So we talk about the prospects of DeAndre Hopkins potentially joining the Chargers. And then another question from our mailbag, which was very interesting, is from Alvin saying, has Tom Telesco brought enough weapons for Justin Herbert? And then we give you our very first bold predictions of the season.
Excited for the first bold predictions of the season, and I think it's a fair question. We will be getting into some Chargers mailbag questions today because we're probably getting into more OTA stuff on Friday. But today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL. And when you enter the promo code LockedOnNFL, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. I can't wait for mine to get in. But I also... David, I think when you look at someone like DeAndre Hopkins, I think when you know the Chargers cap situation, you automatically think, okay, it's probably not possible, right? Because the Chargers are paying $20+ million to 2 wide receivers already this season. How much money can you invest in that? Cap space wise, they're sitting at about $12.5 million. They can't really spend all of that, but how much of that could you give away to someone like DeAndre Hopkins? How much is he going to be commanding? Because I think the other thing is most of the time, 90% of the time, the players are going to follow the money, right? As much as you want to say, hey, we'll go get, the closest shot at a ring or whatever it is, most of the time money talks, and that's probably what's going to end up winning out. If it's a bidding war, they're probably out of the game right there, right? This is why, we're talking about this. He went on the I Am Athlete pod, and he was asked, who would you want to play with? The number 5 quarterback he mentioned was Justin Herbert, which is great to know superstar players want to come play with Justin Herbert. But in the Chargers roster specifically, right, and with their wide receiving core, I don't see how it would make any sense.
Yeah, it's really fun to kind of visualize it or kind of dream about what DeAndre Hopkins would look like with the rest of the Chargers offense. But unfortunately, that's where it has to stay. It has to stay in that dream state, unfortunately, considering the contracts that the Chargers have in that position group specifically, and of course the Chargers drafting not 1 but 2 wide receivers. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of room for somebody. And hey, superstars, obviously you're going to try to make room for those type of players because they are game changers. And DeAndre Hopkins, looking at the stats over the longevity of his career, he is without a doubt a superstar wide receiver. A guy who has done it for a long time, has been highly productive, but the Chargers just don't have the money to make this work. It just makes it very hard to believe that they would cut into a large portion of the remaining cap space to bring in someone who kind of feels like you have some of those similar skill sets already on the team.
Depending on what version of DeAndre Hopkins you got, he would be the best wide receiver that Justin Herbert's ever played with, and he plays with Keenan Allen, right? But you don't know if you're going to get that version. If you knew you could get that version, maybe this is something you go do, right? I don't think that it's just, drafting Quentin Johnston that prohibits this from happening, right? Or, I think it's that, plus you have 2 guys in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams that are going to get theirs, right? There's only so many snaps. I don't know. Like I've talked before, adding strength to strength is not a bad thing to do. The Buccaneers going and adding, Antonio Brown when they already had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, right? We've seen stuff like that happen. The Bengals
Eagles continuously loading up on defensive players, just year after year after year. Yeah,
exactly. It's not a bad idea in a vacuum, and I think if you have an opportunity to add someone like this, I think you do it. But you combine that with the fact that the dude's only played 19 games the last couple of seasons.
Yeah.
It's hard because that's because of injury, because of suspensions. Like, he's a great player if he's right. You don't know what version you're going to get for him. But I don't even think they would have enough money even if they wanted to do it. And I think the other biggest thing is, David, is there's a lot of other positional needs. Like, the wide receiver is probably the Chargers' deepest position. We haven't done that show yet, but when we do, I think that's going to be the group. There's obviously bigger needs elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how you can come to the table and justify bringing in another wide receiver, especially when you look at your edge group and you say we could probably add some veteran talent there. You look at your tight end room and you can definitely see that you can add some potential there. Your safety room is obviously something that we've talked about all offseason, where you feel like adding a veteran to that group would probably be a smarter, more sound business decision. So yeah, there are definitely other more impactful, higher priority positions that you would be looking to fill with, one of the two open roster spots that you currently have right now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're looking at it, you'd say, okay, well, John Johnson's available, right? And you have a much bigger need at safety than you do at wide receiver.
Yeah.
And that's true, right? I mean, if you're looking at it, you have bigger needs at safety, tight end, edge rusher, corner. Like, there's a lot of other positions. The problem is, those other positions don't have a superstar available at them, right? Just because, like, you have a bigger need at safety doesn't mean you can just go sign a star safety off the streets.
Right,
like,
of course.
You're talking about, the only real superstar that's available on the market right now in this, in DeAndre Hopkins. So DeAndre Hopkins, like, I think if you, have a trio of him, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen, obviously that maybe stunts the growth of Quentin Johnston some.
Yeah.
You're not getting a big impact out of, the guy you used your first round pick on, which is a little problematic in that sense. But, like, none of those guys should stop you from trying to get as much talent as possible. This just seems like too loaded of a wide receiving room. And I think if DeAndre Hopkins actually sat down and thought about it, like, he probably doesn't want to share targets with all the dudes they have in that room. So I think, yes, of course, you'd love to add
one football to
somebody.
go around.
Of course, right? And, I mean, the Chargers just not even at that position have other guys. But he's a great player. If he's right, if you knew you were getting that, I mean, you might just have to sign him anyway. There's just no, guarantees that you're going to get that player. I think the other thing is, David, here is just, it's nice to see star players wanting to come and play with Justin Herbert, right? We did see Justin Herbert. He was out at the Chargers annual charity golf tournament, right? And he was talking about DeAndre Hopkins and said all the right things. He said he was a great player and, said all the things you expect him to say about it.
Yeah.
While also saying, I love my guys. Brand Staley said the same thing. I love my guys. But I think it's nice to see you have a guy that is, getting satellites. He is a sun, right? Like, and everything is kind of orbiting around him, and other stars kind of want to come and play with him. And I think that is something that is noteworthy from this, even though it's not going to come to fruition.
At the bottom line is this: greatness recognizes greatness. And DeAndre Hopkins, at this point in his career, he doesn't really have anything to prove other than, wanting to go win as many football games as possible. And he even said it. He's like, hey, I'm at the point in my career where I am not going to be playing with a rookie quarterback. That's just not what I'm looking for, not what I'm looking at trying to do with the last few years of viability of my career. I want to go to one of the top throwing quarterbacks in the league, and your quarterback, Justin Herbert, got mentioned with the rest of those guys. And, those guys being Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and, of course, Justin Herbert. So it's very, very nice to hear him being, talked about in the same light as those other players.
Well, and I think especially because he doesn't have the most swagger, right? He doesn't have the
he's
most
a very
drip.
Silent, unassuming type of guy, right?
Right. He doesn't
Justin
have,
Herbert
like, the
is.
bravado that you see guys like Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow having, right? And, even Lamar Jackson, even Josh Allen, right? Like, all those dudes carry themselves in a certain way that you wouldn't probably put Justin Herbert in that category, but it doesn't matter because he plays so freaking good.
His
that guys
play
want to come play
loud enough.
Exactly. He lets his play do the talking. Like everyone says they'll do. Justin Herbert is, like, committed to that lifestyle, maybe even to a fault sometimes. I'd rather be out here trying to go recruit these guys. Get out there, tell them you're going to launch 80-yard cannons down the field. But nice just to see him throwing. He also said he's going to be throwing at, in live drills, in team drills going forward, 7-on-7s and things like that. So progress injury-wise is where it should be at this point. Hard to say anything's going to slow that process down at this point. But we do have another segment and more fan mail questions to get into from you guys, including if Tom Telesco has done enough trying to bring in free agent receivers or offensive weapons, or even trading for offensive weapons, because you've seen a lot of other teams do that around the league. And we're going to get into that, but first I need to tell you guys about my new favorite pair of pants and shorts. And of course, I'm talking about Birddogs. First of all, Birddogs make you look good. And I mean, one of the things that me and my wife always go on about is like, I want to wear shorts. I live in San Diego. I'm most times going to be trying to wear shorts, even if we're going out. Not to like super fancy stuff, but just going out in general. My wife does not like it when I wear shorts. Birddogs actually look so good that they get a pass. So like, these are hugely, I'm biased because they give me the pass to wear shorts. And they're like just an all-in-one short or jogger, wherever you want from Birddogs. You're getting everything in one. Birddogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. You'll look nice, and they do exactly the same things as expensive brands like Lululemon, right? But they fit way better, and they fit way better than those stiff cotton shorts that you usually have that are super restricting. You're not going to get any of that with Birddogs, because Birddogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabrics that look just like khakis but stretch to get you a way slimmer look without having to sacrifice movement. You need that mobility, guys. But you don't want to get those boxy shorts that are going to make you look like a Lego person. You want something that's going to make you look nice and are also super comfortable. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL and enter the promo code LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise. Well, David, we wanted to get to some more fan mail stuff today because the Chargers haven't had much going on besides the golf tournament this week, so we're going to get to their OTAs that they're doing before mandatory minicamp next week. As the everydayers know, we'll be here to cover every part of the offseason for you guys, and we're going to never try to go more than one day, even during the offseason, without getting a show out to you guys. So we have great questions to get into, including a doozy from Alvin, your favorite, obviously, one of the everydayers for sure. And he asked this: why don't the Chargers ever use free agency or trade stuff to put superstar offensive weapons around Justin Herbert? David, this is an interesting question. And I had to think about it a little bit because, first of all, Tom Telesco doesn't almost ever trade for anyone, and then he traded for Khalil Mack last year. So obviously he was down to do that.
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, I think about this question kind of like this, right? Has Tom Telesco done enough, right, to bring in enough around Justin Herbert, the offensive weapons around Justin Herbert? And let's start with the free agency and the trades first, right? Because those are two areas we haven't seen really addressed at all since Herbert took over.
Yeah, no, since Justin Herbert was appointed the starting quarterback of the Chargers have not brought in any free agent wide receivers of any kind. Now, obviously,
besides DeAndre Carter, yeah.
Right. Besides DeAndre Carter, which was brought in to be more of your punt returner, kick returner, but saw a lot more snaps on offense than anybody was anticipated, and he played admirably filling that role.
It's him and Andre Roberts, right? Like, those are the only kind of additions. You had technically wide receivers, but more special teams guys.
Exactly. So, yeah, not really, any wide receivers in that realm. Then you kind of look at, other offensive weapons, and I think you shift your focus to the tight ends. He has brought in a couple of tight ends, but nobody that would be considered a superstar. Just, probably guys that were just Band-Aid types like, Jared Cook for 1 year, and then you bring in Gerald Everett on a 2-year contract, and this is year 2 for him. So, as far as that's concerned, not really anybody of note.
In free agency, the Chargers, since Justin Herbert has taken over, have not brought in a superstar of any nature offensively through free agency or through a trade.
Yeah.
That's just the fact of the matter, right? The problem is, though, is it's like those things are super volatile, right? And like the other part of it is, too, is, okay, well, most of the guys you're seeing get new weapons didn't come in with the weapons that Justin Herbert had. Justin Herbert was drafted and had Keenan Allen right away, had Mike Williams right away, had Austin Eckler right away, even had Hunter Henry as a rookie, right? So, like, he had weapons around him, but those weapons are all older now, and we haven't seen it addressed really since then. And I think that's where the fair part of the criticism comes in. But he was already loaded. Let's look back at what the Chargers have done as far as who they brought in the past. The last time they traded for a wide receiver, at least substantial, was Chris Chambers. Right, a second-round pick for Chris Chambers, which ended up being a terrible trade, honestly, for the Chargers, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
But then you look at their free agents, right? Travis Benjamin, Robert Meacham, Eddie Royal had some moments. That one wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
ready for this one? Griff Whalen, right? Obviously,
my
the
God.
everydayers, you'd have to be a long time everydayer to remember the Griff Whalen references when the Chargers were so bad they signed Griff Whalen and got even worse. But the things they haven't worked out for the Chargers in the past historically.
Well, and it's probably
ahead.
against Tom Telesco's general philosophy too, right? His general philosophy is he wants to draft and he wants to develop and he wants to re-sign. Like that's what he wants to do. Like that is what he is aiming to try to do. And that's what I think brings you to the draft. I mean, I think that's the only thing that, the jury's probably still out on some of the picks, but
Right.
Lately, at least the last few years, he has made a couple of attempts to try to bring some weapons in.
So if you're looking at the draft, he's drafted 5 receivers, but 2 of them came this year. So it's hard to say, obviously
Right.
spending a first round pick on a wide receiver shows a commitment for weapons, but it's year 4. And the
Right.
3 other receivers that you drafted up until this point were Josh Palmer in the 3rd round. And then when Justin Herbert was drafted, you took Joe Reed, more of a special teams guy in the 5th.
Yeah.
And you took a flyer on KJ Hill in the 7th round. Those aren't, premium picks. Those aren't.
Yeah. Not showstoppers, right? Yeah.
Not at all. I mean, they're guys that, you can't really expect much on. If you
Right.
hit on one of those guys, it's cool, but you can't rely on one of those players going off. If you're looking at tight ends, they've only drafted Trey McKitty. And that's it, right? And we know what that's turned into so far. Running backs, again, they've drafted 3 running backs since Justin Herbert has taken over, but they're Josh Kelly, Larry Roundtree, and Isaiah Spiller. And you really don't know with any of those guys, right? None of them would be ever considered elite offensive weapons, right, at this point. So
Not at this point, no.
no, and so I think it's kind of a somewhat fair criticism, at least when you're seeing, the Eagles traded for A.J. Brown. But really all they had before that was Devonta Smith and Dallas
Right.
Goedert, probably, right?
Yeah.
Dolphins trade for Tyreek Hill. Really all they had at that point was Jalen Waddle. Maybe, you throw a tight end in there that they didn't even really use at all last year. But either way, I think then you look at the Bills trading for Stephon Diggs, the Raiders trading for Devontae Adams, and they already had Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs. Teams are trading for it. I think the Chargers just kind of were too content because one of the things that stopped them from going and making these big trades, David, is because you decided to pay Mike Williams $20+ million a season, right? You already have Keenan Allen on his 3rd contract with the Chargers.
Right.
And so I think being content and betting on those guys in their older years is what really prohibited them from making any of these other big time moves.
For sure. I mean, those contracts, they take up a large portion of your cap space. I mean, so when they are given those contracts out and they're giving that type of money, I mean, they're showing that, hey, you guys are our stars. I mean, we're paying you to go out there and perform.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just what the expectation is. But also, they didn't even take any flyer chances on some other guys, like a Kadarius Toney, like the Chiefs traded for, or, the Jets trading away Elijah Moore. I mean, just some of the even lower end names that you don't know that could turn into something more of a lottery ticket. He hasn't even really taken those chances. So, I think, considering all of those factors, I mean, it is a fair criticism to try to ponder here.
Yeah, it's hard because it's yes, he hasn't added enough, maybe, right? And I think he took too long. I feel like they were too content and just said, hey, we have 2 superstar wide receivers, and they went and got Josh Palmer right in the 3rd round. Whatever. I mean, maybe they were expecting more from him at this point. I think he's been fine for where you drafted him. But you didn't really plan the next step. You didn't plan what was going to happen, because the thing is Keenan Allen's, 3+ years older than he was when Justin Herbert first took over, right?
That's true.
Mike Williams' body has 3 more years of kind of wear and tear on it than when Justin Herbert first took over. So, yes, they're addressing it now, and we'll see what happens with Quentin Johnson. And you do have teams like the Bengals where they have Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and they drafted all those guys, right?
Yep.
But they spent a 1st and a 2nd round pick on Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, right? So they used premium draft picks to go get that, and had Joe Burrow tear his ACL, so they got another really, really good pick the year after he was drafted. So that obviously helped out a lot too. There's different ways to do it, but it just feels like Justin Herbert's weapons, even though they're big names, are getting a little older. They're not as explosive, which is the thing with DeAndre Hopkins is he doesn't make you more explosive. Him, not Josh Palmer, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams, that's not a super explosive group. Josh Palmer doesn't bring a lot of explosiveness. Quentin Johnson does. Maybe Darius Davis does, but I don't know. I think it's fair, but I think the other thing is Justin Herbert. It's not like he's the lack of weapons isn't been what's slowing him down. I think they should have paid more attention to tight end, right, and maybe found a way to not just bring in Band-Aids like Jared Cook and Gerald Everett, right?
Yeah.
Didn't bring back Hunter Henry. I don't know. But, like, they don't have many superstar offensive weapons right now, and it feels like all of the big quarterbacks have a superstar player, potentially, right? Like, they have a Jamar Chase or Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, the list goes on. Yeah, I mean, they do. And A.J. Brown, all those guys. The standard now is as high as it's ever been, but we'll see, because Quentin Johnson could definitely change the way we feel about that. But we do have more questions to get into, including making our first bold predictions of the season, or season-long bold predictions. And we're going to get to that coming up right after this. Let's get back to our Chargers mailbag here and get into a question from superfan Zach, who writes in today. What is one bold prediction you have for the team this season? Recently, Sports Illustrated predicted that neither Keenan or Mike will lead the team in receiving. That is bold. And that Herbert will set a new career record in terms of fewest interceptions. I could definitely see that one, too. I don't even know if that one's that big of a, bold prediction. Sports Illustrated, get on it, whatever. But, David, we will have a bold prediction show. I went kind of a different way with mine because I think I'll be using, different players and things like that when we rehash this right before the season, right, when we have a better idea of everything. Yeah. Where did you end up going with this one?
Yeah, I mean, I did go for an individual player, like a specific player, but I think the reason why I did that is because the impact of this performance is going to reverberate throughout the entire, honestly, throughout the entire team. And that is Joey Bosa. And I think you're going to see Joey Bosa put together the best year of his career. I think, he's talked about the health being, up and down. And I understand there's a lot of people out there that say, hey, you got to show it to me. And I get that. I trust me. I understand, especially with the contract that the Chargers have given him, the amount of money that he is making. But I feel like this is the offseason where he's really been able to take care of that chronic pain that he said that he has really kind of just existed with. And he's able to get that corrected. He's been able to train the way he's needed to train. And he's going to come back with Khalil Mack on the other side. I think this is going to be the healthiest Joey Bosa that we've seen in 3 to 4 years. And that is going to manifest itself in an all-time season. I'm talking 15 sacks, 8 forced fumbles, and 23 tackles for loss. I think Joey Bosa completely goes off this season.
Yeah, man, and the Chargers would be so much better for it. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you probably had that exact same bold prediction in other seasons for sure. Something along those lines. I mean, Joey Bosa is always the, hey, this is the year he comes back. This is the year he finally puts up the big sack number. Like, we've definitely done that before. If this is it, I mean, it would be, monumental, right? And maybe gets the Chargers towards a competent defense, right? A competitive defense that can win you games. But that's a big ask coming from where they started at, or I guess where they ended things last season. So I ended up going with something a little bit different, since I'll probably go players later on. My bold prediction is this: the Chargers will be a borderline top 10 rushing unit in 2023. Ooh. This is the reason I went this way. Right. I believe in Kellen Moore. I think that the new scheme fits the Chargers better, but I also think it fits Austin Eckler better, and I do think he's an underrated runner that has really been hampered by some not great run blocking in front of him. I think you even saw that in 2021 when this offensive line was mostly whole. They were an effective rushing unit. I don't think they're very far away from it. I also think that this is the best Chargers offensive line that they've had potentially in a long time, and I think having all those guys hopefully together, right, and healthy, that'll be a big part of this, is those guys keep gaining that chemistry and staying healthy throughout an offseason with a new offensive coordinator, right? I think that's part of it. And I also don't know if Isaiah Spiller will be, RB1 in 2024, and I don't know who's going to win RB2 in 2023, but what I do think is that both Josh Kelly and Isaiah Spiller are both more than capable enough of being a legitimate complementary option to Austin Eckler. And I think that whoever that guy is going to get a legitimate opportunity this year. I think he's going to do well with it. So wouldn't surprise me at all if the Chargers can be a much better rushing team in 2023, get some more light boxes because of Kellen Moore's more vertically inclined offense, and hopefully get some better run blocking and a better run schematic in front of these running backs, because it's been pretty stale in the past. So let's get to Santi Zap, however you want to say it. He was asking this. I'll let David translate it after. Simple but complicated question. J.C. Jackson, what are the non-negotiable deliverables that the Chargers need from him this hopefully bounce back season? David.
Yeah, so the translation here, Santi Zapp, huge Charger fan, awesome wrestling content creator. He's basically asking what kind of season does J.C. Jackson have to come back and deliver for the Chargers to want to keep him for another season on this contract?
So, go ahead.
Yeah, so, with that being said, I think there's definitely a couple of parameters that, J.C. Jackson has to meet. And I think the first one is games played. I mean, you got to be available. So I think it's got to be anywhere from 13 to obviously 17 games would be ideal for that. I think the reception allowed, like the reception percentage allowed, has to be closer to his career norm, which is around 53%. Like J.C. Jackson was very, very, very dominant for a long period of time. Like that's the expectation. And then I think, you look at tackles, his career average is around 50. So I think that's what I'm expecting, but it's all about the interception numbers when we're talking about J.C. Jackson. So I'm looking for 6 to 9 interceptions. I mean, he's going to have to return to that, dominant force that
So you think he has to have 6
him.
interceptions this year to be brought back in 2025?
I mean, the Chargers brought him in for one specific reason, and that was because they were not good enough at turning the football over. That is what he did in spades. That is why he got this big contract. If he does not deliver on that number, then yeah, he's going to be one of those guys that are going to be looked at as a potential cap casualty.
David, you can't say non-negotiable numbers and then go 6 to 9, 13 to 17. So you think he has to play at least 13 games?
Yes, at least 13
have at
games.
least 6 interceptions.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, we're close. I had him, 14 plus games is what I would want to see. I think, and I think some of the things are less quantifiable than others, right? I mean, I think 6 interceptions. Interceptions are so fluky for most people not named J.C. Jackson, Casey Hayward led the league, right? In 1 year at 7. Never sniffed 7 another season. Didn't mean he wasn't great, right?
Right.
But this is the calling card of this player literally named Mr. INT. So it's a little bit different when you're talking about this guy specifically.
Yeah.
I have 4+ interceptions, double-digit pass breakups, and most importantly, just has to show the ability to fit and play well and excel in this scheme. Because he has a giant cap hit. The Chargers can somewhat get out of it after next year with the post-June 1st cut. So yes, he does have to put up a good season in a year where they're trying to get down from $60 million projected over the cap to where they need to get to. His is going to be one of those contracts that has to be discussed at the top of that list. So let's go to Bolt Up Andrew real quick, who asked one more real quick question. Would you rather the Chargers keep 6 wide receivers or 6 defensive tackles if you could only choose one? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, last year the Chargers carried 5 wide receivers and they carried 6 defensive linemen. For me, I think we saw how disastrous that ended up being for the Chargers in accordance to the wide receiver room.
Yeah.
I would much rather see them carry 6 wide receivers. I think there's almost no other scenario outside of an injury that they do not carry 6 wide receivers, considering the players that they have at that position on the roster. Right. So for me, it's pretty simple. It's 6 wide receivers.
Well, so the funny thing is like both of the rooms that you're talking about here were similarly decimated, right? Like,
yeah.
The defensive line lost Austin Johnson, their starter for the season, lost Christian Covington for the season, lost Tito Abonia for the season, right?
Yep.
Like Jerry Tillery's cut mid-season. Like that was a room that needed some depth as well. I think when you look at the players, right, if you just play it out, I think it kind of answers it for you. If you go defensive tackles and you want to go 5 there, Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, Morgan Fox, Scott Matlock, and Tito Abonia. Yep. Those are the guys that we feel like are hard to cut anyways. Tito Abonia is not ready to go, then it's probably Nick Williams or Jared Clark or Gerard Clark that takes that spot. And maybe those guys are a little easier to hide on the practice squad potentially. That's another thing. If you're going 6 receivers, it's Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnston, Josh Palmer, Darius Davis, Jalen Guyton.
Yep.
Hard to imagine any of those guys getting cut. Jalen Guyton is the surprise cut we brought up a couple weeks ago. Everydayers already know. But still, we both said it would be hard to do it, and we wouldn't do it, right, if it was our decision. So I think in this scenario, it is 6, even though the bottom of that defensive line group is going to be a heck of a competition. But that is going to do it on today's show. The good news is we have OTAs that are happening the next couple days, so we'll be back on Friday to recap that before the Chargers next week, when we'll be here with you as well, everydayers, getting into the Chargers mandatory camp. We'll see who shows up any holdouts. Will Justin Herbert hold out because he hasn't gotten his contract? I really doubt it. But we'll be back with you guys on Friday. Until then, to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on YouTube and listen wherever you get your podcast from. And hit us up, or make sure you follow us on all of our social medias, because that is a place where we also post the show every single day. So you can follow us on Twitter at LockedOnLAC. Follow me on Twitter at DanTalkSports, and David Drogemeyer's DMs are always open at DroTalkSD. You can also find us on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page and at Locked On Chargers on Instagram. We're excited for the rest of this offseason content. And remember, we will be back with you guys on Friday this week, getting into everything going on with the Chargers OTAs. But we will talk to you guys then. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.